The Cleveland Browns have been telling us all preseason that Tyrod Taylor is the team starter. So when Taylor fell, bent his wrist back, left the game, and then came back, people thought he'd be done for the night. He did return to finish out the first half, but never came back out to the sideline after halftime. Baker Mayfield did come in, sputtered with that first unit, only threw for 76 yards and a pick on the night. All right, Chris Kenny, we're going to get to Baker in just a second. But first, what was your reaction to Tyrod coming back in the game after hurting his wrist?
Well, it felt like a player that wanted to get back out on the field. And I think Tyrod understands the inevitable that at some point Baker Mayfield is going to replace him as the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. I mean, this is something that's obvious. When players are in the NFL and you see guys
Have you ever been in this position?
No, I've never been in this position. I never had a guy as a first-round pick drafted at my position. But guys understand it. If you've been around the National Football League for any period of time, you know that when they draft somebody with one of those high picks
or when they
at your spot.
And you came in to take someone else's spot.
As a free agent, exactly. When they start signing guys in free agency or they use high draft picks on players, you know the inevitable that guy is going to be at the top of the depth chart. It's like Vegas. Money plays. The Cleveland Browns has more invested in Baker Mayfield than they do Tyrod Taylor. So at some point, Tyrod is not going to be the starting quarterback. So he wants to take advantage of the opportunity while he has it so he can showcase his abilities, and hopefully he'll be able to get another job as a starting quarterback at one of the other 31 teams.
And the other, listen, the Browns have been very clear on their messaging. Tyrod's our starter. We want Tyrod to start the whole year. There is one easy, for every team in the league, exit ramp from whatever you've been messaging, and that's injury. Like, that isn't abandoning your plan. That isn't going different from what you've said. That isn't changing the message. It's injuries happen in this league. Guy got hurt, next man up, see how he plays. Now, I saw him fall, and in real time, I thought he was seriously injured. I didn't think Tyrod would be able to put himself back into the game. It looked to me, maybe the angle was odd, but I know Troy and Joe also thought when they showed coming back from break the replay that it looked like his wrist bent in a funny direction that it wouldn't bend unless it was either dislocated or there was some type of fracture. But when you saw him he ran off the field, runs into the locker room, I assume to get the x-ray. They find out he doesn't have a fracture, and then he's standing on the sideline with nothing on his arm. He looked like a guy who was thinking exactly that. No. The game plan was for me to get this many series. Just because we're going to have to go back and forth, I'm still getting that many series because we can't also look at this knowing Baker struggled. Like, Tyrod didn't know Baker was going to struggle. Baker didn't know he was going to struggle. It's a very different narrative if Tyrod gets dinged but is not injured moving forward, as is the case, and Baker continues what he had done up to this point in the preseason, which is play clean, effective football against backups, by the way, with an easier defensive front. So I totally get why Tyrod, not many starting quarterbacks would have to do this, but Tyrod's kind of the starter with an asterisk, which is why he, I think, had to do this.
But does Tyrod have the last say on whether he plays or not? Like, is there a little and I don't know, I'm just asking, is there a responsibility by the team to say, we know Baker's not ready to start, we know Tyrod is our starter, I know the x-rays were negative, but I don't want to put him in a position where maybe there was a tear or something, why don't we just shut him down for the night? It's not going to change our opinion on anything. Isn't that the responsibility of the team to maybe jump in and say,
well, first when he got injured, he went into the tent, then he went into the locker room. In the locker room, they have every state-of-the-art piece of equipment. They have qualified doctors that they knew exactly when he came out of the locker room. Now, as a player, at that point, is there an injury? No, there's not an injury. It's called a woo-woo. It's called being nicked. It's called everyday life in the NFL. So at that point, the training staff cleared him. So at that point, Tyrod and the coach probably had a conversation. He's like, how do you feel? He said, I feel good enough to go back in. And at that point, it's up to the player, if he can go in, to be able to join his teammates. They are at work, and to be able to finish this preseason game. This is how you turn the culture around, by a guy playing when he doesn't have to play. All right? Because we can't forget they've won one game in 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. Right. So if everyone took off when we had a little nick, all right, you can't develop some type of culture. And that's also the reason why yesterday when you talked about Josh Rosen, he hurt his thumb. Right? What'd you say, Nick?
That that's gonna happen during a game, and he's gonna have to play the very next play. That it's that in an odd way for him, that injury was actually a good thing because it gives him some experience of playing after how many times a year we see a guy bang his thumb on somebody's helmet? Like that's a real thing.
Tyrod has no history with the Cleveland Browns and with the players.
Yeah.
You know how you develop history? You know how I trust you? See you in there.
Yep.
See you battling with me. That's how I develop trust, not just because you're on the team. So this is why you must have training camp. It's why you must have preseason games. And Tyrod did the professional thing by going back in there and joining his teammates and trying to continue being the starting quarterback for the Browns.
And CC, I think you make a point when you talk about guys trying to make themselves available even when they're working through nicks and bruises. That's good for the other 52 guys on the roster. But when you talk about the starting quarterback, that cat is a little bit different just because you recognize the hopes and dreams of the franchise. How you feed your family is based in part by how that guy performs. So you need to make sure that your starting quarterback is available. But, Nick, you said Tyrod is that quarterback with an asterisk, right? Just because you know that the #1 overall pick is sitting behind him. So he becomes a little bit more expendable for the organization.
And he has a bigger sense of urgency. What you're talking about, Jenna, where the coaching staff says, listen, we know you're fine. We're going to let the backup play. I think for the vast majority of teams, I don't want to go through all of them now, but for the vast majority of teams, that's exactly what would happen. Like there's Aaron Rodgers, for example, doesn't have anything to prove to his teammates, and he's the unquestioned starter. If he gets nicked at all, even if he goes in, he's fine. Once he comes out of a preseason game, he's not going to go back in the preseason game. But Tyrod has, of all the quarterbacks in the league that have been declared the Week 1 starter, his hold on the job is the most tenuous. He's the one with the biggest asset sitting behind him. Like, he's the one also that is newest to his team. Like, at least Josh McCown, for example, was with the Jets last year, and Darnold was the 3rd pick. Tyrod wasn't with the Browns, and Baker was the 1st pick. And of all the rookie quarterbacks prior to last night, Baker's played the best. Baker's played really well in this preseason. So for all those reasons, Tyrod doesn't want to be Wally Pips here.
Not in the preseason. But when I got cut by Buddy Ryan, I went to Minnesota, and I was trying to learn the offense. They had Anthony Carter, Hassan Jones, both of them established wide receivers, Steve Jordan, a great tight end. About the third game of the season, we went to Philadelphia. Anthony Carter hurt his hamstring in warm-up. They said, Chris, are you ready to go? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Look it up. I think I went for 160 on Monday night. And after that, it was a wrap for Anthony Carter. His career in Minnesota was totally marginalized. That was one of the worst days of his career. And that was the day that he happened to just get a little nick on his hamstring and couldn't go on a Monday night. So I don't like to be disingenuous on TV. And I never recommend something to another player that I wouldn't do. So I understand why Tyrod went back in there. I understand why he came out of the locker room. I understand why he grabbed his helmet, because his professional career is in the balance. And it's just so easy, and it's not really responsible. People say, the coaches should have kept him out. No, Tyrod did the right thing for his career.
Well, and the people also, I think, when you're talking about Tyrod's career, even if you're watching saying Tyrod knows that he's not the starter in Cleveland next year. But that doesn't mean he's not the starter somewhere next year. And when I thought I overreact to things. I thought he broke his wrist. And so I saw it, and I thought, and I know I'm not the only one. I think Joe and Troy thought he was seriously injured. A lot of people thought he was seriously injured. In my head, I do the whole thing. And I'm like, man, Tyrod, not only is Baker now the starter here, but who's going to pay Tyrod to be their starter going into camp next year? The whole trajectory could be different. Now, no matter how long he's the starter in Cleveland, he has the ability to show the other teams in the league, I can be a starter for you.
And I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, because Tyrod could have a great future as a part-time starter in Cleveland. He could win Dorsey and them over there. Say, something, we're not paying him that much money. Let's keep him here with Baker. Him and Baker have something together. And when you go out there and you play in preseason games like that, people in the front office, you can win those people over. But saying, man, let's keep him here. He can be a foundational brick to getting this whole thing turned around in Cleveland. You don't have to go somewhere else. He could be right there as a foundational player, backing up Baker Mayfield once he becomes a starter, and being a great support system for the Cleveland Browns and getting that culture change.
And CC, I think he's well on his way.